Response video to a modern mystic Beardy Man video called Badges. I think he's used that title before, but anyway, it's alright, so he's basically making this argument, this nihilist argument, kind of, I would call it. That's the category I just throw it in. So I use a word to describe it, put it in a category. It may not be perfectly accurate, but it's basically nihilism in the sense that he claims there to be no big game that we're playing. The word meaningful is always meaningless. It's ironic. But that's the substance of one of his arguments, is that meaning is just something we dispose. So this almost gets to the value argument that I'm often having with people, between this difference between a subjective value and an objective value. The distinction between something that we do make up, in our own perception, like what's the definition of a beautiful woman, or a grand accomplishment. Obviously these things, winning American Idol or something, that is sort of a made-up meaningfulness, in that you could deconstruct it into absolute bullshit, that it's only relative to some cultural distinction, some nonsense. It doesn't mean anything, really. It's just a consequence of our capacity to have things be meaningful to us, for us to be stimulated or impacted by things, and therefore put them in this category of it impacted me, therefore it's meaningful. And so he says all the games are these little games, these little psych games. And I keep arguing that no, there are some things, when you deconstruct them, there is no alternative but to say, yes, I can tell the difference. I can say something is definitely better than something else. And if I'm careful enough in describing those two circumstances, I can place a significant value difference between the two things. So if I describe some circumstance where, some little girl named Tiffany or whatever, 6 years old, is trapped underneath a car tire or something, and there'll be no other impact in the world regarding her suffering. Nobody will get an Oscar, or, there'll be no added suffering taken from the world or given to the world. No bug, no anything will be killed differently. Nothing else changes. The only thing that changes is little girl Tiffany has tire on her, or little girl Tiffany doesn't have tire on her. She's either screaming in pain or she's not screaming in pain. And that's the limited... I'm defining the actual reality for you. So just so you don't play a game, some sort of psychic game, to and project onto the scenario some sort of not anticipated consequential outcome. Because there always can be an inadvertent outcome. You could kill Adolf Hitler, and the other guys were even worse. And World War II is even worse, and they get the bomb first, and, there's all kinds of horror everywhere. They annihilate the Jews, and the Afghanis, and I don't know, just name everybody. Everybody good on Earth gets killed in World War II. And it's all just horrible. Well, anyway, I'm just saying you can come up with scenarios like that to defend some bad thing as being a good thing, or some good thing as ending up being a bad thing. So I'm just saying this is the tedium you must go through when you're using these words, because people will want to play these games. So I'm just saying that there are these things that we can understand through this logical dissection. We can get to the root of the matter, and the root of the matter is the sentient organism. So that is the big game. That's the biggest game we can, I think, reasonably access from our point of view. There's no other bigger game than this biological mechanism, 4 billion years of evolution, consciousness, and this capacity to feel and to be in these states that are definable as positive and negative, are grotesquely positive and negative, in that horror, terror, hideous, monstrous suffering versus comfort. We can see the difference. We can apply clear recognition that the difference is meaningful. It's not meaningless. You just can't turn it into meaningless in any rational way without somehow pixelating our consciousness into non-existence. So yes, I can I could make a piece of paper, a folded piece of paper, not a folded piece of paper if I turn it into atoms. Okay, if I turn it into subatomic particles, I can lose its distinction. I can lose its character. But I'm losing it. It's not that it's gone. It's that I am choosing not to see it anymore. Or I've lost sight of it by doing something to lose sight of it. But it's still a folded piece of paper. That is its true, factual, actual circumstance of the matter. It isn't an arrangement that's identifiable. And I'm saying consciousness is an identifiable phenomenon. And it has this component of sensation and feeling, and those sensations and feelings have demonstrable, non-deniable, in my opinion. You just can't avoid recognition of them through your own conscious experience that they exist. They're not phantom phenomenon. They're consistent across all the sentient organisms behave as if this is meaningful. And it is from where all these little games are derived. This capacity for us to be affected creates meaning. And it's the rudimentary capacity that's the valuable thing. It's the value generator. I've made this argument, but that's what I'm basically saying, is that consciousness creates value. When a consciousness is alive and experiencing, value is being created. They're either in a positive, comfortable circumstance or in a negative, uncomfortable circumstance, and we know the difference. We can identify the difference. The difference is significant. It's not a meaningless difference, it's a meaningful difference. So his argument that there is no capacity to make distinctions between subjective, psychological, rubbish establishments of meaning through our psychology, where our capacity to feel good or bad is influenced by reflexes, where we value something that somebody's doing and extend a perception of value. We project it out of our consciousness onto the thing. And the opposite, which is the thing has value, we observe it. We reflexively acknowledge the creation process, the fact that it's creating value, and think, at least, accordingly. We might not behave accordingly, but we think accordingly in terms of recognizing meaningfulness is taking place, value is happening, and it either has a positive or negative dissectable implication. And like I said, we can play games with the dissection. We can find ways to justify one man's pain for another man's gain, kind of bullshit. That's another game we can play with the facts, but I'm saying the rudimentary facts are meaningful. So that's the distinction between subjective taste and objective value acknowledgement. Those are different things. And as game theory, one could argue, like with all games, the goal, the win, is merely in the expression of value creation. So either you create the comfortable state in the sentient organism, or you create the uncomfortable state in sentient organisms, and you do that in some proportion, and it is that proportion, and that is meaningful, and will define where you are in terms of your relationship. The meaningfulness of your life will be established in the big game, the only game, based on how you expended this meaningful influence on meaningful beings, creating meaningful sensations. Yeah. So we'll play some of this, but it's yeah. So anyway, and like I said, he's going to, as soon as the kitchen gets hot, okay, he will pixelate it. He doesn't do it in this video, but I'm just saying that's the end game for him, is that as soon as you recognize the shape of meaning in a bigger context, he breaks the context. He takes us so deep into the particles that the box is made out of that we don't see the box anymore. But the box is still there. Oh, I have to get up. Yeah. Yeah, way ahead. Yeah, so I'm just going to let it play out. Because it's more trouble to walk over there, hit the button, then, I can have a sip of coffee, let's say. Yeah, I can do that. Maybe I'll have a smoke. Half a smoke. You don't mind, right? A little intermission is okay, right? Unfortunately, I wound the clock all the way. So I really did have to get up today. So I had to make sure it woke me up. So it's starting to wind down. It is funny that I have to buy a wind-up clock because I couldn't find a single alarm clock. That little electronic beep 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 shit. I gotta wake up. It's not gonna wake up somebody. In the real world, in the real dream world, because they'll just say, "Hey, there's a beep going on." The brain does beep beep beep, and can't be very meaningful. Little beeping, who cares? So you do need something that kind of shakes the floor a little bit. Okay, there, it's done. Sorry, shit happens.
I can see and appreciate and understand that other people, or even myself, could put upon an action or a happening or something as meaningful.
So, put upon, when he uses that word, he's using the word project. They can project onto a circumstance a sense of some sort of description of why it's meaningful. And again, it would be some sort of subjective aesthetic definition. Some definition based on what kind of music you like, or traditionally what your culture has appreciated, or other kinds of bullshit.
But always the nagging thing comes back to me, but yeah, we're only just making that up, aren't we?
Right. So, and he includes sentience, the sensation between feeling good and feeling bad, as a made-up value notion. That there is no reality to it. That theoretically, if there was two buttons in front of me, and one created, planet ouch, and one created planet ooh, he would say, go ahead, flip a coin. Doesn't matter. There's no meaning here. And I'm saying that is a non-starter. Rationally, logically, evidentially. There's absolutely no evidence, no rational argument that could possibly be made to say it's not meaningful which button you press. You can't deny the fact that there's a difference between, warm, comfy couch and concentration camp. It's just not sensible, logical, rational. It doesn't make any cognitive, reflexive sense in any way whatsoever in any of my 100 billion neurony thing. None of them can make any sense out of denying the meaningful difference between concentration camp and comfy couch.
As meaningful. So it isn't really meaningful, we've just invented meaningfulness for it.
Right. So that works for Olympic Games, that works for sushi, that works for good dress for the Oscars, that works for all this bullshit where meaning is established by popular opinion and popular sensibilities, popular capacity to be revolted or attracted. Yes, there are tendencies among the psychologies of human beings, and majority status does not give it empirical status, does not give it perfect status, does not give it reasonable status. So yes, we know that cultures can be wrong in what they value. People can be wrong in what they value. But that does not mean that value does not exist. That, in my opinion, is a logical error. Yeah.
And everything we do is just invented meaningfulness. There's nothing that really is meaningful. And for Sned on the other side...
See, so there he says it. Nothing. It's just not that. Now he's going to talk about happiness. And I agree with him on this happiness thing, but he uses the argument for the happiness thing that happy is a childish word. It's a silly word. It's just not a grown thinking person's word. It's just it's a nonsense word. So, but happy for 15 seconds, happy for 10 years, happy, what do you mean, happy which way? Happy, comfortable, happy, ha 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 ha, laughy, happy? Well, what is this word? This doesn't mean anything. What would I rather be, comfortable or laughing? I mean, is laughing comfortable? Maybe I'd like to sneeze more than I'd like to laugh, to tell you the truth. I mean, a good sneeze can sometimes feel better than a good laugh. Certainly, even in the old days, I'd say a good cry, was sometimes more cleansing, give you a nicer reboot than a good laugh. So, happy? Yeah, silly word. Anyway, but it's just silly to say because humans make up meaning doesn't exist. Sorry. No. Non sequitur and such.
Knowing this, and knowing that everything we do is just playing on this big playing field, little games that we've invented.
So everything is just little games that we've invented. So everything is just aesthetics. We're just fighting over personal taste, whether you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream. There is no meaningful discussion to have, no meaningful conversation, no meaningful event, because it is not consequential whether a billion people suffer or a billion people don't suffer. And that's just stupid. Of course it matters. There is an efficiency to this game, and the goal is clearly, it is clearly established by the meaningfulness of sentient experience. So obviously the way to play the game is to improve the status of the sentience. And, I would argue not to play with it at all because it's just dangerous and messy, but regardless, I'm just saying we know the efficiency is in there. We know that's where the value is. We can know it, as a fact, not a fantasy, not something made up, but something so fundamentally logical that not a single rational counter-argument can be constructed. If I give you the choice between two clearly independent events that have no consequential impact beyond the event themselves, and you have the choice of suffering or comfort, there is no rational way it could be defended that the discomfort button be pressed in preference. It would be meaningfully stupid, meaningfully retarded, meaningfully not logical, meaningfully evil, not to appreciate that value distinction. It would be stupid and ignorant and preposterously nonsensical not to be able to tell the difference.
For no apparent reason. Sned's question is, to me, can you be happy with that? And I say no. I can see that people can be happy by winning your case, your human rights case, and making a lot of people freed from slavery or whatever it might be.
Right, but you could say, and you could argue, quite obviously, that'll work for 15 minutes, and then you'll be looking for the next flaw. You know, you can sit there and go out and wax your car, go out and do it, and see what happens to you psychologically. You know, I mean, yes, you can do it. It'll say, hey, it looks pretty good, but you're going to start seeing the other flaws. You're going to start seeing new problems to be fixed. So as soon as you fix a problem, the problem list, it's like a Pez dispenser, and it'll just pop a new one, okay, into the slot, okay, to be dealt with. That's the way our psychology is made to function. We're not made to be comfortable. We're made to be uncomfortable because we're made to fight. And and let's just not get gamed by that psychology, and just by understanding that psychology, you can reduce how much the psychology is gaming your intellect. And then you can take some control logically over your behavior and your psychology by just simply recognizing it's a psychology. It's bullshit.
But in itself, it is only a small game being played. And it's an invented, contrived game, just like sliding down the mountain.
Even the way he phrased this argument, I would argue is kind of silly in the sense that he's putting civil rights defender in the same category with entertainment superhero or something. So sliding down a ski slope. Heroic athleticism in the same category as heroic human rights liberation or something. And I would argue that even in that example, you could see that there's a problem with that. That one thing does seem a lot closer to a meaningful game than the other thing. And so even if you didn't concede the existence of the big game, I think it would be there has to be some sort of little dissidence in saying, yeah, there does seem to be something fundamentally different between those two things, because one does seem completely and deliberately and acutely focused on some element of this welfare thing, where the other thing seems completely focused on hero shit. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with any kind of. You could replace the winner with anybody. Anybody who wins, it's going to be somebody's child, right? Some daddy is going to be proud somewhere. So it's almost like it doesn't matter who wins, because there'll be a parade, no matter who it is. There'll just be a parade somewhere else with different people in it. Where the civil rights thing does matter, because there'll be some sort of net balance. Where the argument could be made that there's this net improvement in the overall condition of sentient beings. Seems to me pretty obvious. So I don't think these are the best examples you could use to demonstrate your point of all things being meaningless, when you use two examples that to some extent do demonstrate that they just provide sort of an obvious perception of a distinction here.
A bit of whatever it is a contrived game. It is not a big mega game. It's just something that we're inventing. And
right. So, like I said, he's saying we don't discover the fact of sentient meaningfulness. We make it up. It's not because we personally experience and say, shit, I really hated that. I don't want to do that again. It's not that we personally experience something and say, God, that was awful, just horrible, sensually, just absolutely yuck, and be able to compare it to something that's not yuck, something that's blissful and comforting and easing and satisfying. And of course, our personal experience screams it. I cannot presume you not to be conscious. Okay, I have to logically. I got to assume you're conscious, that you have these feelings, these sensations, and you know what I'm fucking talking about. Come on. It's consistent. It seems quite consistent. The drugstores wouldn't exist if people didn't have these sensations. I know you have them, and I know you can tell the difference between them. And that informs us. It informs us of our sensitivity. It informs us of the fact that we could be in different value states. preferential states that are absolute. They're not in this game, this one narrow sentient game, quite obviously. And then we can just extrapolate that by the numbers. We can just say, okay, if there's 1 trillion sentient creatures, we can just add up the state they're in. But we certainly know, I know the game I'm playing right here, I can certainly tell what the game is. The game is, don't be on fire. Don't have a fucking sword up my ass. I mean, it's quite obvious. There's no, it's not disputable. There's no made up bullshit here. Come on. It's discovering the simple truth. We're sensitive organisms, and it matters. Fuck.
Again, knowing that, and knowing all the other things that go on in a world, being an adult, I can't be happy, as in, this is just words, obviously, but words is all we have. I can't be happy about any game, knowing that it is just an invented game of pretend meaningfulness or pretend get you through life being happy, content.
Yeah, I don't even think that's honest, to tell you the truth. Because I think if you could know that it didn't mean anything, that you could be happy because you could just be in the moment of the competition, puzzle, putting together, whatever you're doing, and there can be this satisfaction in the accomplishment. You can call that a bit of happiness and walk on to the next thing to get your bit of happiness from. So I think in that context, the word happiness would be serviceable. I mean, I don't like the word. It just is kind of a silly, shitty word, but I'm just saying you could use the word to describe your state of being and that you're not blighted by any oppressive circumstance. But if your relative's in a concentration camp, if somebody you care about is in harm's way, well, then you're going to be distracted by that fact, and you're not going to be able to play the game the same way. You're not going to be able to live in your moment and live in your psychology and enjoy your bliss or comfort, because you'll be distracted by the fact that there's some problem in the context. Your context is broad enough where you're seeing the rest of the world, and the background doesn't go with the foreground, and there's going to be a lack of continuity. You're not going to be able to swim this monster. But you're not going to be able to. Yeah, the mermaid and the shark, in the shark tank isn't going to work. You're not going to be able to play with the mermaid, okay, when you're in the shark tank. That's not going to work. That's all I need to add, I think.
Whatever it might be, but when you've seen through it and seen through the fact that it's just all just made up to make the best of a bad job, and that's what this world is for people who think they're people, that all we're ever doing is making the best of a bad job.
The very statement, making the best of a bad job, implies the fact that we can tell the difference between the best and the worst. Yes, it's a bad job in that this is incredibly messy, okay? There's no levers you can pull that are free of implications, all right? To make one person happy, you make another person unhappy kind of argument, okay? If I do give the gold medal to this guy, then that guy's going to be sad, and his family's going to be depressed, and blah, blah, there is no, there's very few things you can do in the world where you can be comfortably and relaxed and assured, I did the right thing. That is going to have a good result. I can't even make these videos without knowing that I wasn't completely detrimental to my own causes. I can't be assured of any of it, okay, because of the fact of all the complexity and nuance to the game we're playing. It is incredibly complicated how all the strings are connected in this bomb, and it is a bomb. It's this thing that can blow up in all kinds of hideous ways, and that's why the word best has meaning. So as soon as you use a word like making the best of it, you're establishing a notion of meaning. So you can't really say there's no meaning game and then use a word like making the best of it.
cannot be happy about that. I can drop to another word that isn't so childish like happy is, and I might accept it. I might latch onto it and say, put it on here and say something, but not happy.
Right. and that's an agreeable place to end. Okay, yeah, we both have a problem with the semantics of human language. It's archaic, and it's full of ignorant artifacts, imprecisions, bullshit, and that's unfortunate. And so, yeah, it would be good if we could nuance the language, so when we have a conversation, we can make distinctions between things with just words alone. Things that are a difference between things that make you personally happy and things that make you personally productive. We sort of have the words. I mean, your comfort versus your productivity. I think that's understandable. Okay, that you have a personal condition and you have a personal impact. You are engaged in the world, and your behavior will affect both you and it'll affect the world. And you can understand that, and you can understand that what happens that makes you feel good is one thing. What happens that in terms of how you affect the world is another thing, and those things are made out of the same thing, and that is the impact on sentient organisms. So if you say a word like blubber or pubber, and that means that some kid gets run over in the street today, then obviously I made a mistake saying that. But, this is an exaggeration. But, the very fact is that little tiny things we do are going to change in major ways what happens to other people. There's just no way for it not. And the repercussions can be huge and can go miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. The sound can travel, the echo of your action. Just changing who you marry. Just changing who, a little simple. Just imagine you change one relationship. One single relationship, and you switch the couple. You take that wife and put in that circumstance, then you've changed all these other relationships. All of a sudden, all these other relationships now have to change, because now the guy that did marry her has got to marry somebody else, and that means that's going to change who some other guy married, because now he married her, and now he's, it could go on and on and on and on. In terms of its impact, and that's how we live our lives, and it should at least give us pause to take this a little bit seriously, which people do not wish to do, because they are so obsessed with this happy word, which is a word for the individual, which is the word for the selfish asshole just trying to figure out how to navigate their comfort out of the environment. They are worms. They say, I want the food. They don't really give a shit that they ate all the food, or they shit on somebody else's food, so now they can't eat it. That kind of thing. It's just totally irrelevant, and it's totally the most meaningful thing happening in their existence. So to sum up, I just don't see anything constructive whatsoever, mystic, beardy guy, in making some logical argument, clearly pointing out that much of what we're doing is psychology. If the price for that, is this nihilistic trash, that somehow there is nothing meaningful, that it's all psychological babble. It is not. There is sensible recognitions to be made. There's snow, there's things that are distinct. They can be put in categories. We certainly have the category of feel good and feel bad. We can know that's a meaningful category. And I just, you just undo any value to being intelligent if you're going to throw away the most fundamental, obvious, substantial truth in the universe. I mean, it is more true that it matters what happens to sentient beings than the fact that the sun is hot. It's more true than the earth is round. It's more true than any other perception you could possibly have through any sense, is this fact that it matters. And I'm telling you, not just from an intellectual point of view, observing sentient creatures for over 50 years. I'm telling you as a sentient creature. Now, maybe you haven't had sentient experience. Maybe that's true. Maybe you are a reptilian. Maybe you don't feel obnoxious, repulsive sensations and incredibly comforting and blissful sensations. Maybe you can't tell the difference, but I fucking can. And I'm telling you, the difference is everything. It's not this much or that much or that much. It is everything. It is all the meaning in the fucking universe. So stop this bullshit. I mean, really, to discount the biggest fact in the universe because you want to malign silly people playing with the word happy is a silly game to be playing. Stop it.